This week on Quality Digest Live, we take a look at a new ISO 9001 database from the International Accreditation Forum. Want to find out what that's all about? Well, join us in 13 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Deschamps, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. Well, many of you out there are pretty certain certified to ISO 9001, and many more of you look for ISO 9001 certification when you are looking for vendors. Now, sometimes this is a preference. You just prefer to deal with somebody who's got a QMS certification. Sometimes it's a requirement, but either way, it usually requires a lot of work for your purchasing people. You have to contact a possible vendor. You ask them if they're ISO 9001 certified. You might ask them for proof of certification. And finally, even if they do provide proof, usually they'll send you a JPEG or a picture of their certificate. Even when you have that in your hands, is it real? Is it valid? How do you know that they were really certified and didn't just print this thing out on their printer, right? So over the years, there have been many stabs at creating some sort of entire database of all ISO 9001 registered companies that anybody could go into and look up whether or not a company was certified and get some of the details of that certification. This is just like a fantastic idea, right? And there were 3 companies that did this that I can think of, and all of them eventually gave up on the effort. So I don't think there really has been a database out there for 10, 15 years. Well, the ISO 9001 database is back, and hopefully better than ever, since it is now spearheaded by the International Accreditation Forum. The IAF, if you haven't heard of it, is the World Association of Conformity Assessment Accreditation Bodies and other bodies interested in conformity assessments in various fields, management systems, products, services, personnel, and other similar programs of conformity assessment. So here with us today to talk about the new database is Grant Ramaley, Director of Regulatory Affairs for Aseptico Incorporated. He is also the co-convener for the Medical Device Working Group for ISO 13485 and Vice Chair of the User Advisory Committee and member of the Database Management Committee for the IAF. Also with us today is Nigel Johnston, founder and CEO of QualityTrade.com, developer for IAF CertSearch. CertSearch is the database we'll be talking about, and also a member of the Database Management Committee for the IAF. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Hi, Dirk. Thank you.
Hey, so first of all, Grant, just for our viewers who don't know what the IAF is, although they should, a lot of them probably don't. Who is the IAF? What do they do? Why should we know about them?
Well, I think it's just like you mentioned, they really are kind of the United Nations for auditing organizations. The conformity assessment bodies, a lot of companies don't know this, they get audited to make sure that their auditors are competent, that they do the audits long enough and that sort of thing. So they are really the organization, the international organization that ISO itself has put their faith in to establish whether a cert is credible on an international level.
Okay, so they're kind of a clearinghouse for accredited certification. Well, maybe not a clearinghouse, but well, maybe a clearinghouse for accredited certifications, right?
I tend to see them as an organization they're the enforcement, the international enforcement, the Interpol, if you will, because the different countries all have their different accreditation bodies. In fact, in Europe, they have a regulation for accreditation which requires that if you get an ISO cert, that it be issued by a conformity assessment body that has been properly accredited using the international norms for accreditation. So it is something that's kind of in the background, but super important. I mean, people spend a lot of money to make sure that their certificates are credible worldwide, and it is really because of the IAF member accreditation bodies that happens.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the database. What it does, who runs it, where the data comes from, and so forth. Just kind of a brief overview of what we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, the database was something that it just some of us on the user advisory committee had pushed for a long time ago, where all the people on the user advisory committee are from industry, and not just ISO 9001, but medical device industry, food safety, automotive, aerospace. So all of us realize that it's really hard when you're dealing with a supply chain that's worldwide to sort of check on every single cert. So, and since the IAF is sort of underwriting all of the certificates, it just made sense that there would be some initiative within the IAF to take upon themselves to build the database.
So the database is not just ISO 9001, it's other types of certifications as well then?
Yeah, any management system certificate. So food safety 22000, of course, a lot of the regulators are taking interest in that. Of course, medical device QMS, regulators that I work with in other parts of the world are heavily dependent on using 13485. So yes, there's a lot of different management system certificates out there that are covered by the IAF accreditation bodies.
And who does the database, who is it intended to serve? Now, I mentioned purchasing people up front because I know that very often, in our dealings with people, we know that very often purchasers are looking for companies that are ISO 9001 or some other QMS certification. So I see that as one user group. Who all do you envision this database being used by, and who was it designed for?
Well, I have a very narrow focus on quality management systems used for regulatory purposes, like the medical device QMS 13485. So the regulators that I'm working with simply will not import medical devices unless they have a certificate that they can trust. And many of them are kind of leading on the forefront of accreditation. Some of them have tried to create their own accreditation systems. Because the supply chain is really global, the regulators are kind of turning to the IAF more and more to make sure that, at least on the regulatory side, those ISO certificates that they're using to regulate medical devices coming in carry an accredited certificate. So really, I look on the regulatory side. Regulators are a big end user side, but obviously, I mean, I work at a dental company. I actually review the certificates of the suppliers, and I get some questionable looking certificates. Sometimes I wonder if they were created by the person that sent it to me.
Right. Well, so tell me a little bit about why is it that it's the IAF doing this? And also, I understand, is there any kind of connection with ISO itself in this whole thing?
Well, if you type in ISO survey, in your Google sometime, and you'll see when you look at the surveys of all the ISO certificates in the world that they state clearly that they look to the IAF accredited certificates as the ones to trust. So ISO itself and is really, I think, the lead. They wrote the standards. They're members of the IAF. They have a liaison with us. So it's a cooperative effort between our organization. They develop the standards. The IAF members actually apply ISO IEC standards for accreditation, 17021, 17011. So it's at that level, I think, really the authority on why IAF. Go look at the ISO organization itself and see what they say.
Okay. Well, I want to loop Nigel in here a little bit. So Nigel, tell us a little bit about what is in the database. So as a user, if I go out there and I start using the database, what would I expect to find in there?
Yeah, sure, Doug. If you think about it from a user's perspective, when they're trying to determine if a certification truly is an accredited certification, they need to do three things. One, they need to know that the certification is valid. Two, they need to know that the certification body has been accredited to issue certifications for that standard. And three, they need to know that the accreditation body is an IAF MLA member and MLA signatory. So in order for us to do that, we're pulling in sources of data from those three sources. So we're pulling in data from the IAF, and they're sending information about the accreditation bodies. We're pulling in data from the accreditation bodies, and they're providing the data on the certification bodies and their accredited standards. And then we're pulling in data from the certification bodies on the certifications that they've issued. And so doing that in parallel, when a user comes to IAF CertSearch and verify a certification, they can have the confidence knowing that the certificate is valid, the certification body is accredited to issue certificates for that standard, and the accreditation body is an IAF MLA signatory. So if you think about it, if they weren't doing it in the global database and they're having to go out and go into those three different sources every time they're trying to verify a certification, that's really difficult. So this really simplifies the process to make it quick and efficient to verify certifications.
And would you be able to, going back to my purchasing example, as a purchaser, would I be able to type in a particular scope? Because maybe I'm looking for ISO 9001 certified company in a particular, for a particular type of product, or can I just search by company name? What is the user actually able to do?
Yeah, no, you can't search by scope. This is designed just to verify individual certifications of known entities.
Got it.
So you must know the company name or the certificate number. You can't create lists of any kind, whether by standard, by CB or AB, for other reasons. I'm sure we'll probably get into that. But this is just to verify individual certifications.
Okay, so getting back to something that I think that Grant had mentioned earlier, and even I had mentioned earlier, is you have a certificate, maybe a company says, hey, I'm certified here, you can see my certificate. This would allow you to actually go into the database, put in that company's name, and actually verify, well, yes, indeed, I do see that they have a certificate, it expires in such and such a time, they are accredited, and their certification body is so-and-so who was accredited by so-and-so.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So you can go to the database and verify that the certification is legitimate and accredited. One other point that we should talk about for users is that we have created a watch list. So that helps users identify the suppliers in their supply chain and the certificates that they want to monitor, essentially. And so that they can be alerted in real time if the status of that certification has changed, whether it be suspended, withdrawn, expired, or terminated. So that helps them have that transparency across their supply chain, which they wouldn't have today.
Okay, and how often is it updated? Not the watch list, but the database itself.
the database, probably to answer that question, I'll give some context on how the data goes into the database. So the three sources, so the IF, the ABs, and the CBs, the accreditation bodies and the certification bodies, they can either update data manually, whether it be individual certifications or in bulk, or they can do it in an automated fashion. So whether an FTP process or an API, I won't try not to get too technical, but the automated process allows the updating every 24 hours or in real time. So we've created a number of different ways you can get data into the database. And I guess an important point is that those three user types, so the IF, the accreditation bodies, and the certification bodies, they're in control of their data. So it's their data, they manage that. So at the moment, you can have data going in at different intervals. I guess from a level of transparency for the user, though, on every certificate, we indicate when the data was last updated. So that gives full transparency to the user. But definitely it's the IAF's intention and all of the members is that we move to more of the automated processes. But given that we launched late last year, that'll take some time before everyone has those automated processes set up. But the good thing is about once the automated processes are set up, then there's no manual handling after that. So it can work like clockwork.
And does anybody verify that the data itself is accurate, or is it just whatever the CB, the certification body, whatever they put in there, that's what they put in there, and if there's errors, that's on the certification body side?
Yeah, that's correct. So definitely the IAF is in control of their data on the accreditation bodies. The accreditation bodies manage and are in control of their data, and likewise the certification bodies. So if there is an error, then it goes back to whoever's uploaded the data and manages the data.
Okay. And is there any cost for using this?
The IAF's intention was that the database was set up not to create costs for the IAF members and their CBs. So after a tender process, IAF actually partnered with our organisation, Quality Trade. We have a vested interest to see the database succeed. We also provide technology. We're a technology company that exclusively provides software and services for the accredited network. So we're 100% aligned there. But we also try and generate trade for accredited certified organisations in another platform. And essentially we're the Tinder of buyers and governments, matching them up with certified suppliers for supply chain and trade purposes. But our biggest challenge was that we couldn't verify the certification. So that was a real problem for us. So that's why, from a technology perspective, we've come to the table to provide the software. And as I said, the IF, the ABs and CBs provide the data. So it's a bit of a team effort to make this happen. But we've covered the cost of the software and operating the software moving forward.
Okay. And Grant, when you were working with the CBs and the accreditation bodies and so forth, trying to find out what it is they would or would not like, I'm pretty certain the idea of poaching came up, that one registrar, one certification body might try to poach customers from the other. Was there much discussion about that when you were trying to kind of get CBs on board with this?
Yeah, I think that conversation has been had probably more than any other from the beginning. And Nigel can tell you just how involved he was in setting up the security to make sure that it was not a system that would lend itself for that. I think the approach that he mentioned earlier, that you could really only just put the name or the certificate number in there. It would be an extremely tedious process to try and, I mean, you're better off just hunting around on the internet and finding companies and calling them up and just soliciting them for work rather than using this database for that. It just doesn't work, because that was a big issue that we surely wanted to address.
Okay. And let's talk about security just a little bit. I mean, aside from poaching, which we know did happen in the past with older databases where somebody would put in, a registrar name, dump an entire list of all that registrar's customers and then go out there and try to poach them, or they would do it by scope or whatever. But what about just security in terms of, it's still kind of sensitive data, security in terms of hacking? Just a plain old nuts and bolts security.
I think Nigel will be better to speak to that part of it.
Okay, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, no, sure. Look, just to circle back, definitely the historical databases which were misused was because you could download the whole list of a client database. So in this one, you can't do that. You must know the company name and the certificate number. But then looking at the technology that we've used to prevent any other misuse, we track all the use. So when a user comes to the site, they're restricted for 3 searches, and then if they sign up and log in, they're extended to 10 searches a day.
Okay.
But all that use is tracked, and putting the users behind a login also helps us to track their use. Some of the other things, though, from a structure perspective, is you can't access the database layer. And all that data is encrypted, and I guess on the world's best sort of security servers. So that's protected from that front. We use a number of other measures like capture codes to prevent any kind of bot or anything like that trying to get in and reverse engineer anything. There's lots of different things around URL structures and all sorts of stuff like that that's encrypted as well, that essentially makes this like Fort Knox, because it was such a focus for us from the get-go, and this is years and years of focus to protect that data. The other thing is, though, we're doing regular penetration testing to make sure that there's no weaknesses. And I guess from an organisation as a technology contractor, where our job is to manage the software here. We practice what we preach. So we're also certified to 27001 and 27701, and our accredited certification is in the database to be verified as well. So it's a huge focus. I think to beyond that, with the IAF, we report into the IAF Database Management Committee, and so we're regularly reporting to them every fortnight. We have meetings, and we talk about all of these things just to make sure we're on top of the governance side and that the data is protected.
Okay. What percentage or number, however you want to phrase it, of certification bodies are included now in the database? How much does it represent the entire biosphere of certification bodies?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we look at the different sources there, you've got IAF, obviously they're 100%, and then the accreditation bodies, there's 68 of them who are MLA signatories. So they're all in there, and all of their data on the certification bodies have been uploaded. The certification bodies, we estimate there's about 2,000 odd management system certification bodies. There's many more who provide product certification, but just if you look at management system certification bodies, there's approximately 2,000 of those. So we're now sitting at 965 accredited certification bodies who have activated their account. So that's roughly nearing half there. And then if you look down to the certificates that have been uploaded, we're at about 420,000. And estimates go around management systems, that's probably around 25 to 30% of the market so far. So it is increasing, but still some ways to go to get that full market perspective.
Okay. And Grant, this question is for you. So we've been talking about, and the IAF obviously talks about accredited certification bodies, but I'm sure you've dealt with as well, there are certification bodies out there that are non-accredited, and yet they do, from what we've heard, many of them do good jobs. I mean, they come in, they audit a company, they do as good a job as anybody else in terms of looking at the quality management system and issuing non-conformances when it's due and doing follow-up and so forth, but they're not accredited. There's also a bunch of shady ones out there, but there are legit ones. So if you are a legit, doing your job, certification body that isn't accredited, why shouldn't you be in this database? I would think they would look at this and say, hey, this is a little unfair. I'm doing a good job. I've got clients. My clients love me. Why can't I be in this database?
Well, it's an interesting point. But look, one of the things that I look at, I work at a small company, a small family-owned dental company, and we sell products, I believe, to 130 different countries. So if you're a certification body, wouldn't you want your certificate to count everywhere? And one of the things that Nigel's mentioned, you hear this word IAF, MLA, 68 members. Those are they've signed a multilateral recognition arrangement. So you have 65 countries. That's not including the MOU, which is the Memorandum of Understanding that every member of the IAF from whatever country they share space with, they are going to recognize a certificate that's accredited by the IAF members under the IAF MLA. So if you were a company that was a CB and you wanted to make some money, why not attach yourself to that so that when you give that certificate to that customer, they can take it anywhere in the world and have the weight of the whole IAF behind you to say, yeah, you can trust that certificate.
So you're saying the certification bodies themselves, the registrars, if you are a non-accredited registrar, why not pay the money to become accredited just so that you have a wider market open to you?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, anyone can say that, but independence is what we trust to sort of establish whether those claims are valid or not. And so it's one of the reasons I can self-declare a very good quality management system to ISO 9001 or whatever, and I might be true with that, but why do people want a certificate? Because they want an independent person to come in and say that declaration that I'm making that my quality management system is good is really that good. And so it's these layers of accountability that we have built into the IAF that help build the credibility that people really want from these certificates.
Okay. And if people want to know about their certificate, they can go out to the ISO Cert database and look it up, right?
That's the goal when we get it all full.
Right. Well, Grant and Nigel, we're out of time, but thanks for joining us today, telling us about the database. There will be a link. You guys will supply us with a link to both the database and information on the IAF, if anybody wants to know what the IAF is all about. Links out to there. They're all on the player page down below us there. So thanks, guys, once again for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay. All right. And if you are, like I said, if you're interested in checking out the database, just follow the link down below there. I believe there's also some YouTube videos that you can look at that kind of show you kind of what you get from the database and how it works. So go check that out. That is it for today's Quality Digest Live. As usual, if you have some ideas of who or what you would like to see on the show, send those to us at qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we will try our best to get them on the show. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next week. So long.